Hello and welcome to episode 110 of Page One, the Writers Podcast. I'm Tarek.
I'm Marco, and thanks for joining us on the podcast where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing process, talk about their career and how they got into the industry, and try and get as many hints and tips as possible. And as Tarek says, this is our 110th episode, which I know I say this every so often on the podcast, but I can't quite believe we've had that many actually brilliant authors and screenwriters and stuff.
Not a bad episode among them.
And speak to us two idiots.
they must be hating their agents. What the hell would they do? Yeah,
exactly.
Coming on chatting to us.
But no, there is genuinely a great back catalogue of people. So please do check it out if you haven't before, because there's bound to be some authors or screenwriters, etc., that you are interested in. Yep. But this week we're speaking to another best-selling author.
Yeah, this week we're chatting with Jane Shemilt, who was a GP. And then she undertook a diploma in creative writing and then a master's in creative writing, because obviously she wanted to get in that writing world. And she became a best-selling author of psychological suspense novels. Her debut was a Richard and Judy pick. It became the fastest-selling debut novel of 2014. That's quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you want as a debut author,
absolutely,
I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, we've had a few authors on the podcast that have talked about attending writing courses and the importance of those. And not everyone does a writing course and not everyone needs to do a writing course. But I think Jane goes into quite a bit of detail about how that helped her and why, even taking that step meant that it was a serious thing that she was doing in terms of her writing. It allowed her and her family to take it seriously and things like that, which can be important in and of itself, I think. But you're not just someone scratching away on a notebook in the back room, getting interrupted all the time.
It's one of these things where I think everyone always says that everyone who hasn't done it, there's plenty of folk who haven't done it and have made successes, but everyone that has done it, no one's ever said they wish you hadn't. So I think it's something that if you're able to do it, it's not a bad thing to do. It will probably give you a helping hand, I think. But if you can't do it, don't stress too much about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's a great episode. So we'll get straight into it after a quick advert for our writer's notebook, and then we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know about next week's guest.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realise it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
Did you always want to be a writer? Because I know you came to a career as a writer quite late on.
Yes. It's actually quite difficult to know what are wants in a way and what what you determine. I think, I mean, when I look right back to when I was a child, we had this nanny who would bring great rolls of paper because her brother-in-law worked in the local printing press. And so we had huge rolls of unprinted on newspaper. My sisters drew on them and I told stories. And I can remember still that feeling of power and freedom in making up stories. And that kind of continued throughout my school year. And I was far the best. I don't mean the best of the class, but my personal best was reading and writing. And I loved my English A level. I still remember it. But so really, if I'd gone to what I wanted and was best at, I would have read English and nearly did. But when I was 18, I went off to do what was VSO in those days in a mission centre in the highlands of what was then Rhodesia. And I had quite a lot to do with the hospital then. And there were hardly any doctors to go round. And it seemed to me, well, you know, this is a profession where you could actually be quite useful. Mm-hmm. I came from a medical family, so there was that as well. And I thought, well, I can go back to writing. I didn't realise how long it would take. But, you know, by the time you do your medical degree, and then I met my husband there, got married, we had 5 kids. I got into a career in general practice. And so it wasn't till really space began to open up as my 2 girls left home. They went to university. And my eldest said, come on, Mum, you know, you really want to write, don't you? I don't know how she knew, because I didn't think I talked about it very much. And so with that sort of extra space, I was still being a doctor. I went to do a diploma course at Bristol Uni. And that was just on Tuesday nights. And they became the best nights of the week. And I just couldn't believe it. After the years of talking about hypertension and how to treat kidney disease, you were suddenly talking about authors and writing and how to structure your work and poetry. And oh God, it was just brilliant. So at the end of that year, I had to make a decision about leaving medicine and going to do an MA, which I had the opportunity of. So that was really the crunch time.
So you chose to do the MA in the end?
I absolutely did. Yes, I did. And it just felt like swimming with the tide, you know, and I felt I'd done medicine for quite a long time. My husband's a neurosurgeon, so, you know, the family is still doing its bit in that way. No, I just felt I really wanted to. And that's when I began to take it seriously.
Had you completely abstained from writing during your medical career, and was it only when you took that writing course that you really got back into it, or had you been writing things throughout?
Do you know what? I hadn't really, because there wasn't time. You know, it was quite difficult to carve time to go and do medicine, you know, with 5 little ones. And the one thing I did do, which is an absolute, as far as I'm concerned, a prerequisite, I read. I never, ever stopped reading. Yeah. You know, the kids and I would go to a bookshop as a kind of activity on a rainy day. So they'd pull the books out and I'd quickly get some books myself. And no matter how late at night, I always read. And I think that is what kind of kept the flame alive. So when I began to write, it felt extremely natural. In fact, you know, there were stories just kind of waiting to be, to come out. And I won't say it's easy, because it's never easy, but it felt extremely natural. Yeah. And
for people listening who are wondering about whether or not to do a master's in a creative writing course or something similar, you know, what kind of stuff did you do in that course, and is it something you would recommend other people doing as well?
Yes, I absolutely would. I'm a little bit wary of saying it's certainly not the only path, you know, and it's quite expensive and it's very hard work. But what it does do, especially for somebody like me, it allows you to feel, okay, this is my profession, or at least this is what I'm going to do now. And the family recognize it. So you've got this kind of dedicated space in which to learn the craft. And it was an opportunity to learn the craft. You do modules, you choose your modules. One of them I chose was the writer and place, actually, which was wonderful because it allowed me to realize, how much of a character place is in novels. And I love writing about place, and I love reading about place as well in novels. So that was good. We had groups, tutorial groups, and you fed back work. And that was useful because it began the process of accepting feedback, which can be quite tricky. You can be quite possessive about your novel. And not inevitably, but by and large, if somebody, and especially if more than one person, thinks something should change, it should change. It actually often makes the novel stronger. And we had brilliant tutors. And that's where I wrote the first draft of the novel that became Daughter. And it was also how, at the end of the course, we were, everybody was invited to submit a chapter of their first draft. And that was bound in an anthology and sent to agents.
Oh, cool.
Agents get an awful lot of submissions. I mean, they get 70,000 submissions. Sorry if that sounds a bit off-putting to anybody. But, they do. And so if you do an MA, it kind of helps a bit. And certainly they, collated all these different agents, and we met them in Foyles in London. And we chatted like mad, and my agent approached me, and that was my agent. And
wow.
then, it was lucky. And then a few months later, she got me a deal, publishing deal. So that was lucky. It's certainly possible to do it another way. But for me, at my stage, with the children used to me being on tap, and, it just allowed me to live a different life.
It's interesting because we have had other guests that have done similar writing courses, and they also found, certainly I think a few of them that I'm thinking of, also found the agents via the course almost.
Yeah.
So the common approach is to say, do your 3 chapters, your synopsis, your query letter, and post that, and sort of hope to get picked up by the agent. But it does seem that these courses is by no means a guarantee, clearly. You still need to be able to write well and everything, but they can help with maybe making the right contacts and getting your stuff before the right people to then hopefully make a decision on it at that stage.
I think that's right. I mean, first of all, you have a chance to really polish your draft because of the feedback and the tutors who are published writers themselves. So they understand, perhaps what is being looked for more than you might, certainly more than I would have done writing on my own. So that was important. You actually do meet agents throughout the year as well. Well, we did at Bath Spa. They came down for evening talks. You can do this. There's this wonderful book called, you probably know, Artists and Writers Yearbook. And you can look up and see what agents want the kind of book you're writing, whether it's sci-fi or or non-fiction, even whatever genre you're writing in, you can find somebody who might be interested. But it's tricky, and even if you've done the MA, rejection is quite common, and you can be lucky, as I was, because somebody's looking perhaps for something specific that by chance you are supplying.
Yeah, that's right.
And sometimes it can be extremely specific, So it's not the only way, but it's helpful. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that first book that you wrote there, Daughter. You wrote that during your MA. Is that
I did.
Right?
Yes.
And how was the process of writing that? Was it, because obviously you've written 4 or 5 books since then. But how was it writing the book whilst doing the course? Was it quite helpful to have the course in the background to help push you through writer's block or any of that stuff?
Absolutely. I didn't get writer's block, actually, because I was just, to write. I had writer's block, it's not been easy since. But that first, I felt as I was in heaven. It wasn't easy, but I had my tutorial group, my colleagues, and they'd say, oh, we want to find out what's happening. So that was hugely incentivizing to leave it on a cliffhanger and to write for them. And the other thing that was useful, I started writing a book really inspired by my patients. I wanted to, in a way, pay homage to the grace with which people carry loss. Almost everybody you see when you're a GP has a loss of some kind. It may not be obvious. It might just be the loss of youth or the loss of health in some subtle way. But people are so brave, and you don't normally see that. So I wanted to write about that. And it started with this grieving woman. My quite blunt tutor said, well, look, Jane, this is just one long dog walk. I'm so bored. And I hadn't realised about plot. I hadn't realised, I was so naive about structure of books, even though I've read them all my life. I hadn't really analysed what it was that drew me through books. I didn't think I even read particularly plotty books, but I thought, oh yes, I've got to make people. So I think I read Girl with a Dragon Tattoo and worked out that that was, you know, very compelling, very well written. And so, and also at that point I was watching The Killing. I don't know if you, that was the first Scandi Noir, and they brilliantly combined stillness of the grieving parents with a kind of urgency of plot, trying to find out where the girl was and who'd killed her. I can't quite remember whether they knew she was dead early, but they were trying to find out who killed her and where she was. And so that was very urgent. And then it was also still. So I kind of borrowed that because I did want to write about the grieving process, but I also wanted people not to think I was on one long dog walk, which is what we did a lot. So I went back in time to around the time of her abduction, so people would want to turn the pages. And I interspersed that with this stillness of grief. So I can't think why. Oh yeah, so that was how I did it. And it was a learning process. I wouldn't have really noticed how boring it was unless I'd been told in no uncertain terms.
And did it take you a while to find your voice, as they say? Did it take, or was that something that came quite naturally to you, your style of writing?
I think when I look back to bits of writing I did on the diploma course, actually it's not that dissimilar. Mm-hmm. I always struggle with the concept of voice. I never really know what it is, except that I can say which of my friends have written which. You know, you can tell. But it's not something that I think you do deliberately. You know, it kind of emerges. And if I start to think about it too hard, I kind of wobble, you know, like riding a bike.
I think that's definitely true, because I think if you know, I'm sure we've all read books where someone is clearly trying to put on, it's almost like a bad actor in a way, you know, they're over performing and or trying to put something there that isn't actually them, and it kind of comes across when you're reading it. Yes. But like you say, a good author, you will recognize it, even if you can't quite define it. You'll recognize it as their work, I think.
Yes, that's right.
And no, when it came out, it was a pretty big success. It was a Richard and Judy pick. It was shortlisted for the Lucy Cavendish and the Edgar Awards. And am I right in saying it was the best-selling debut novel of 2014? I mean, that must have been, what a satisfying launch that is. That's incredible.
I know. I mean, sorry, I know. I didn't say it like that. But I mean, the thing that actually I didn't really know. I know now, but at the time, I wasn't on social media. I mean, social media wasn't as big. It's grown enormously in the last 5-10 years. I wasn't on Twitter. I did start to be, I think, at the end of that process. So I didn't really know. I saw it was in the Times bestseller list, but it didn't really impact, you know, like a lot of things that change your life. You don't really realize that's what's happening at the time. Mm-hmm. And the race was on to write the next book. And so it was lovely. And meeting Richard and Judy was a high point. And, you know, there were lots of things that were very nice about it. But, you know, a lot of the time I was just in the kitchen or at the table writing. You know, nothing huge seemed to change at that point. But it was a wonderful launch into my career as a writer. And so that helped both me and my family take me seriously.
And you've talked about your ideas and where they came from. And you mentioned that the idea for your first book was partly from the patients that you'd worked with and that you'd met. And I think I read, maybe on your website, you talk about you getting your ideas drowning lesson was from a journey you've taken through Africa. How Far We Fall was inspired partly by your husband's work as a neurosurgeon. So in your approach to writing and to idea generating, is it just a case of having your eyes open and anything can kickstart it, and as opposed to sitting down with a newspaper and saying, I'm going to hunt for a unsolved murder or something which I'm going to find interesting?
Absolutely. I mean, often these ideas are stored a long way back with the patient. I didn't really even know that this patient had stuck with me. But when I was a medical student, I met a young psychotic lad. I used to hang around a lot. And he came in through casualty late one night, this young man, manic, incredibly manic. He'd actually taken cannabis, a lot of cannabis, and that can do that. And so his eyes were glittering. He was totally wired. And he actually said, I feel like an aeroplane going down the runway about to take off. And I absolutely remember that, because I recognized that, because I felt the same at times. Because if you get I used to stay up all night, not that infrequently, to study and to kind of be around the wards and so on. And because I came from an arts background, so science didn't come naturally. So I kind of overcompensated. Anyway, when you're very sleepless, you can sort of go a bit manic yourself. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but, you get these weird feelings of, being quite wired. So I felt terrific kinship with this guy. I can't pretend that those little kind of, wingtips of mania that touch me were anything like the serious illness that people get when they're truly psychotic, which is horrifying and difficult. But all the same, I felt then, and I still feel, we're all on some sort of baseline, and how important it is to recognize that and not to other people with very serious mental illnesses, as is still happening. Anyway, he sat at the back of my mind for years. And this most recent book, The Patient, was a chance to really develop the idea of somebody who has a serious mental illness and yet is very attractive, very lovable, very deserving of everything that everybody else has in their lives. And he was the character, the central character that I started with for this story. And then other bits of, I mean, as happened to me, a big life-changing event when I was around 50. Well, the woman GP in my story has a big, she falls for this patient. So that's a big life-changing event, a second chance, if you like. And that I was kind of picking up resonated with a lot of women. The chance before it's too late, whether it's to have an affair or to start writing or, have another kind of life. People are interested in that. So that was something I sort of brought in quite deliberately to run alongside the idea of this patient. And then there was the setting, and that I've always wanted to write about where I grew up, which was Salisbury, actually where the book is set, which is Salisbury Cathedral Close. Because it was a place of very interesting contrast, fantastically beautiful, famously beautiful, but also quite disconcerting. The great big cathedral.
So it sounds like for you, it's always characters and setting that come first, and then you will work the plot around these characters and setting that you want to write about. Is that right?
Yes, I think so. There isn't a script. I mean, there isn't a way that I always do it, I don't think. But in this, I knew I wanted to write a love story because I'd never written one. And not a straightforward one. It was usually sort of rather messed up. And I thought this was a chance to write about, because I realized that when I read a story or watch a film, very often, however deep and clever and cutting edge, I'm actually rooting for the love story. I want that couple to get together at some fundamental level. I mean, it's not the only interesting thing, but it is interesting. I think we're quite hardwired for relationships to work somehow. Anyway, so I wanted to write about a relationship. But you're right, I hadn't the plot developed as I went along. Yeah, and some of the twists didn't happen till really quite late.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did want to ask about that as well. What's your process when it comes to writing? I mean, it sounds like, do you, in terms of planning stuff, do you, I'm getting the impression you don't sit down and write out a massive plan of what's going to happen when, or, is it more like a kind of rough idea of where you want to go and maybe an idea of an ending, or do you have a pretty good kind of aim that that you want to reach as you're writing?
I think it's a mixture of all those things. I mean, there's that pre-writing stage where these ideas come at you, or you revive them from some deep place. And then writing, I usually start just doing a spray diagram, because I find that quite creative. You put your character, if that's what you're starting with, in the center of the page, and lines, whatever that makes you think about. So you've got quite a densely covered piece of paper, very untidy. And then I usually start writing, say, about 5 chapters, feeling my way into the story, and then I make a chapter outline. Because I think it's quite helpful to have a sort of path mapped out. So if you're going for a walk, you've got your map and you know where you're going, but it's not rigid. So as you go, I think for me, it works best if I allow myself to think, oh, wait a minute, I know what I can do at this point, or I can have another character. I think I'd be very bored and quite sort of constrained if I knew I had to do what I'd set out to do. So I think it's a bit of both. It's nice to have a loose structure that is flexible.
And does that mean that, are you someone that revises as you go, or do you get to the end of the first draft, try and push through to the end and then revise it after that and sort of clean it up before you show it to anyone?
I think that would be ideal. I kind of can't resist fiddling with it as I go, but my aim is to get it out like a lump of clay that you then shape afterwards, because I do find writing, it was different when I wrote my first book, and now sitting down to write, especially that first draft, sometimes it's really grinding out the words, isn't it? It's tough. And it doesn't always just write it, well, it doesn't ever really write itself. So I just think, right, I'm going to give myself permission to write badly. Somebody told me that. And I mean, there's a limit. You can't write so badly that you can't recognize any words, which I can do. So I try to write so that I can understand what I've written, but not get too bogged down, because that can be very disheartening, and you just stay, swirling around in the same little stagnant pool. So I try to write it, and then so much gets done on the rewrite. Yeah.
We've spoken to some people who they've said that they'll just, if they're struggling with a particular part, they'll just put sort of in square brackets.
Yes.
Something happens here, and then they'll jump to the next bit, and then they try on the rewrite, they'll try and join it all together in a more cohesive way.
Absolutely. Whatever works. I absolutely think that. And I mean, rewriting, there's a magic in rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. I mean, when you say rewrite, I didn't start from the beginning, but I go through and you deepen characters, and the plot gets more interesting and connections. And then the very last bit is, once I stayed up for 72 hours, completely bonkers, because at that last minute of, I think it was just, the book was actually due in after having had its edits, I began to see things. It makes me sound mad, but I began to see connections that I hadn't seen before. Page 100. Oh gosh, that links with page 6. I didn't realize that played out in that way. And so you kind of shone that up a little bit more. And that's a very exciting phase, but it comes at the very end.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, the stuff I enjoy the most is the rewriting. When it's with every pass you do, it's kind of getting closer and closer to that nebulous idea you had of it in your head, and it's not just that pile of flaming vomit that you wrote out the first time. Yeah, it's. I know a lot of people hate the rewriting phase, but for me, I love going back and then the hard part is the first draft, and then it's fun just going back and tweaking it and improving it.
And so do you just rush it? Rush it?
Yeah, I try and just rush it with first draft. And I feel like, first draft's probably getting better each time, but it's still not great, and it still needs a lot of work. But I know I'm always like, well, I'll fix that later, and I have to write. I can't. I'm not able to do the whole, fill in this, do this whole scene later. I have to write it in order. I can't jump around in the narrative.
Some people can. There's some people almost jigsaw their work.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I don't know how they do that. That's not. There's no right or wrong, of course, but I know I wouldn't really do that. I get very muddled myself if I write, like my first book, Writing in Split, and I've just written and submitted the draft of the book that's coming after The Patient, and that was split time, and that can get terribly confusing. You kind of lose yourself. Yeah. Sorry, you carry on.
So when you write something like that, where you've got a split time kind of narrative thing, would you write one whole narrative strand by itself and then another, or would you jump back and forth?
I jump back and forth.
Okay.
Because it very much depends what you reveal. Because if you're trying to make it cliffhangery, you could easily reveal in the future narrative strand what happened in the past.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you don't really know where you are until you write a bit of future, then you write a bit of past, but you don't go. You've got to avoid the future next time saying what happened in the past, and that is only really possible, I think, when you do them in parallel.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yeah, although we have had, I can't remember who it was that said, someone said they do exactly that for those reasons, because as you say, otherwise. But on the redraft, or one stage of the redrafting process, they will look only at each timeline to make sure it is consistent, and then look at the other timeline, sort of a thing.
Yes, I think I probably do that. I do everything, really. Yes, I'm sure I do that, because you can forget. Mm-hmm. I can forget. And so you've got to pick up. If you're talking about, in The Patient, I had a dog. In both narrative, does The Patient have two narrative strands? Well, yes. Well, it has two places more than two narrative strands, actually. And in one place, I had a little dog, and I forgot about the dog completely. So I had to go back and put the dog in. I just left him out. And, there are people who would really mind that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What happened to the dog,
And have you found it, obviously, when you're writing your first book, albeit you were on the course, but there was no there was no hard deadline for you to say, right, this has to be done. But obviously, once you're picked up and you have a deal and stuff, there becomes that pressure, I suppose, of a deadline. Some people find it helpful, some people don't. I mean, how have you found that change?
I actually, although I kind of moan about it a bit, I actually do find it helpful, because otherwise you can almost like drown in time. Mm-hmm. And I've worked harder in the last 3 months than I have all year, really. And by working that hard, the book, I began to see things. The book smartened up a lot. I think I'm quite glad I've got my next book done, because when a book comes out, and it's lovely to have opportunities like this to talk. And, if you're really worrying about a deadline for another book while you're doing this, that is tricky.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, we've talked about your new book quite a lot, but we should actually, why don't you tell us a bit more about what the actual book's about? And it's out this month, April 2022. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what it's about and what people can expect?
It's April 28th.
28th.
Sorry, 28th of April, sorry.
People try to buy it and go away and go bicycle. Well, it's the story of a GP who lives a very affluent middle-class kind of life in an affluent middle-class kind of town, which is Salisbury. She's settled in her work and in her marriage. She has a grown daughter and very widely respected and responsible kind of person, and overtly happy. Although actually, her life does feel very samey to her, and she remembers the past when she was a child and the world seemed very open, and now here she is in this kind of tunnel-like life. And she, one evening, while returning notes to the practice, she meets a suicidal young man, a bit younger than her, a patient, a Frenchman, who's an architect who's actually moving to Salisbury, though she doesn't know it at the time. She thinks it's just a one-off encounter. And she has the time, because it's after hours, to really listen to him. And that makes a very big difference to him. As it does, because as a GP, you don't really have time to listen as you'd like to in a helpful way. And what happens after she meets him again and an affair starts? And that has huge consequences, far more than you might think. Some of the affair plays out in Provence and some in Salisbury. Provence is where he has a house. And unbeknownst to her, she's stalked, and a whole chain of events start that culminate in murder. And I suppose the story, really, as I've talked about, is about mental health and second chances, and also by setting it in Salisbury, the kind of shocking effect of something like a murder on a small town community. I don't know if you want me to go into it in more depth. I'm always a bit worried.
Yeah. We don't want any spoilers, but I mean that's a good summary of that. And yeah, as you say, that's out on the 28th of April. Well, before we move on from the process, I did want to just ask one more thing, which was, are you someone that do you use beta readers, or do you show it to anyone, or is it just sent to your agent or editor and you just work on it from there?
Well, I was lucky enough in the MA, we made a little writing group. And so we let each other see out. Not everybody wants to do that. And not everybody will read the work. And I used to send it out chapter by chapter, but actually I think it's best to send it out when you finish, because people didn't always understand where it was going and would ask questions that the answers would come later. Mm-hmm. So they have helped a lot. But I may be getting to the point where I'm happy just to write it and send it in. But I do think sometimes people say surprising things, notice things that are so obvious actually afterwards.
Yeah.
You totally missed it. So I'm always very grateful if people will. And I've got an MA tutor as well who will sometimes read my work, and that's just brilliant.
And how do you know when you've got this kind of feedback from people, and you're getting feedback from your editor and your agent and stuff, and they're throwing up stuff? How do you decide what stuff to listen to and what stuff to see? The certain stuff comes up, you think, no, I think you've got that wrong on this stuff. Is there a point when you think, if 2 or 3 people flag it up, you think, okay, there's something there? Or do you try and stick to your guns a bit more?
I tend to be quite open to feedback. I'm quite self-critical. So if somebody says something's wrong, I take it quite seriously. But on the other hand, sometimes I think, well, no, I know that character wouldn't say that, or would say that, or something. Sometimes it's something I feel very sure about. Mm-hmm. But quite a lot of the time, it's just very useful. And especially, as you say, if 2 or 3 people say something that isn't working, I'll certainly try that. And then the final arbiter is my editor. And I would have to be very, very sure of myself to ignore my editor. I don't tend to. I mean, I think editors have a lot of experience and also will know what works in the market.
Yeah.
Which another consideration, really, isn't it?
Yeah, there's that kind of balance between you want to write your book your way, but you also want to sell the book and make money off it. And it's that kind of, each side has to have a bit of a play, doesn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, I think, I can't remember who it was that said it. Was it Neil Gaiman or someone said, or Stephen King said, if multiple people are telling you something's wrong with your novel, or there's something not working, then you should listen to them. But if they
Yeah.
tell you what the answer is, don't listen to them. It's for you to solve it, but they're
Yes.
pointing out what the issue is. Yeah.
And that it's quite nice doing that, actually, because often when you think of your way round whatever problem, you think of several other things as well, which helps the story that you hadn't even thought about. And
Yeah, and often they'll flag up things that's maybe not. It's kind of what Mark was saying, I suppose. It's not necessarily the actual. What they flag up is not the actual problem, but it's almost like they're flagging up something is wrong with the.
Something isn't working.
Something's not working, yeah, and you have to go deep into the
Exactly.
plot or the structure of it to fix it, and it's maybe manifested itself in a way that they're spotting, but the actual root of the problem's something else. And I suppose it's knowing what to fix and what to leave in. And something we've chatted about before is when do you know something is ready? You know, how many drafts do you tend to do before you think I'm done now, and when do you leave it? Is it when the deadline comes in, or could you do redrafts forever?
I think it's probably, I mean, something happens and you think this is done. And I can't, that sounds a bit magical, but it may be to do with just tiredness. But I think there comes a point, but it takes a lot more work than I ever realized to get to that point. It's, I think I must read books about 100 times. I mean, it takes a long time, but then you think, it's like, I don't know if you've got children, and I don't know if they've ever had nits, but my children did. And you have to brush their hair with a, wide brush, and then you keep going until you get these nit combs with tiny little, narrow divides between the teeth. So you get out every last little nit. Or perhaps that's not the right analogy. Perhaps it's just a child with very tangly hair. So you brush it and then brush it again and again and again, and then you're right down to the tiny little tangles. And then by the time you brush the tangles out, you've got a head of smooth hair. And you know that it's smooth, you feel that it's smooth. And I think that's the same with writing. Although often when I read my book, I almost can't bear to read my books again because I see ways in which I could make it better.
Yeah.
And that's quite painful.
Yeah. And before we go, your third novel, How Far We Fall, I think has been optioned for TV. Are you able to tell us what's happening with that?
I think that stalled.
Right, okay.
Okay.
We had a Scottish writer and it was going ahead, but then it was a question of finance and it didn't get made. I mean, The Patient, I have to say, has been picked up by a Hollywood agent who's very interested, and that's
cool.
So, yeah, but I've learnt,
No, don't get too excited.
You cannot get excited. I mean, things can look extremely promising and not work. So,
so many moving parts and so many things have to line up. And so what's next then? You've got The Patient coming out on the 28th of April this month. And what's after that?
Well, I've written the one after that, I say grandly. I mean, I've written the draft of the one after that. So, I've submitted it.
Nice.
And I struggle to find a way to encapsulate it, but I think it's a story it's a story that opens on the island of Paxos. And it is about really the shocking behaviour of a group of adolescent holiday guests of a very wealthy English holidaymaker against the young girl who is part of the Greek family who look after them. And that leads to devastating consequences. And it's a story of hubris and revenge, very unexpected revenge, and it spans 20 years.
Nice, sounds really good.
So that's that story. I did enjoy writing that. It's the darkest book I've written, but there was something quite satisfying in that, I must say.
Cool, excellent.
And it's gorgeous.
Well, I was going to say, did you go there for some research to do that?
I absolutely did.
Excellent. What was the last book that you read?
Oh, crikey. I've got so many kind of on the go. One of the most memorable ones was Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, which is an excellent, excellent book. And at the same time as that, I've been reading Lamplighters by Emma Stonex. That's excellent. Really kind of magical and creepy and just beautifully written. And The High House by Jessie Greengrass. I'm also reading, actually I read it in the bath, a book called Assembly by Natasha Brown. And that's an amazing book. It's so elegant. So yes, that's my answer to that. I could go on.
What about the last film that you watched?
The last really good film I watched was The Power of the Dog.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I've still to watch that. That's on my list.
It's amazing. Very powerful, very sparse.
I was told to read the book first. That might help with enjoyment of the film. No?
I didn't even know there was a book.
Yeah, apparently it's based on it. Because I've read a lot of folks saying it seems to be a real love or hate it type movie, and a lot of folks are saying it's very slow and stuff. But someone I talked to, I think it was maybe my mum, said that she read the book first and helped her understand what was going on with the film.
Yes.
Although I often wonder with things like that, like if I watch a film of a book that I've liked and I'm watching the film with other people, I can almost feel myself being tense. Will they understand what's... I want to explain why this is... But in fact, it's fine. It works as a film entirely on its own.
Yeah, I mean, it has to shoot a good film. Yeah, it should stand by itself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've read The English Patient and seen the film, but they're both excellent in very different ways, really. I mean, the book is a very profound experience, I think. I quite often read the book, I read again and again to work out how he does this sort of silky thing with time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he hasn't got strands. It's just a continuous weaving, and that is really brilliant. You do see that in the film, but it's much more straightforward. But the film was magical as well. So, yeah, they were two very different experiences. But I must get the part, because there were bits that I would like explained in The Power of the Dog.
I mean, I remember I read The Gone Girl, which I loved. And then I saw the film version not long afterwards. And I remember watching the film version and I was just thinking, I'm actually a little bit bored because it almost felt like it was so close to the book and it hadn't done anything different. No, it's not criticism of the film, but...
No, but you knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think so much of that book, of the joy of that book is the twists and stuff. I mean, you know where it's going. It's not the same... You know, some films have something like Arrival, you watch that and you know the twist, but because the twist impacts the film in such a big way that it makes it enjoyable even more the second time when you know what's happening. But Gone Girl was different, and I kind of thought, I kind of wish I hadn't read the book for this one.
Yes. I mean, The Power of the Dog isn't really about plot or twists. I mean, there is a surprising thing that happens in the end, and but it's not twisty. It's just... you go deeper and deeper and deeper into character and play again, and it's not fast, but it's magnificent.
Excellent.
Nice. Okay, I'll have to watch
it. And then the final question: what was the last TV show that you watched or are watching?
Gosh, well, I'm watching. Well, I watched Stanley Tucci's Going Around Italy.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I mean, that is just brilliant because it's more than a cookery show. It was the sort of culture of Italy, and I think I'm going to set my next book in Italy.
Do some research, definitely.
It's going to be about food.
And
it was just lovely. And then I'm watching something which is really more my husband's and son's thing, the Slow Horses.
Oh, that's meant to be awesome. Yeah.
It is very good. It's literally dark and gloomy. But I'm enjoying, and it's got Gary Oldman. What's his name? Gary Oldman, yes. And he's just so magnificent. I mean, he's just such a good actor. So that is just for the joy of the brilliance of his acting. And then I'm also watching something called The Split.
Oh, yeah.
I'm enjoying. I mean, that's more light-hearted in a way, but I love the interplay between these three sisters and the sort of psychology of that, and I think that's very well handled. So those are the three things I'm watching really.
Excellent.
Nice. And the very, very last thing we do is a super quick fire either or, and there's no right answers apart from one, I always say. But the based on your bookshelf behind you, I think I know what the answer with that one will be. But we'll start off with Gone Girl or Girl with a Dragon Tattoo.
Oh, Girl with a... Well, I think they're both very good. I do.
But if you had to pick one.
Okay, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, because it was,
enough.
Very helpful to me at the time.
Yeah. TV or cinema?
Because of COVID, I'd probably say TV. I mean, so many astoundingly good things. I mean,
Yes, absolutely. Night owl or early bird?
Actually, both. At the moment, I'm getting up early because I'm trying to swim every day. So that makes me tired. So I think I'd say early bird. But when I get near a deadline, it's kind of merges.
Music or no music when you're writing?
No music, just silence. Yeah, I can't understand how people can.
And the last one, real book or ebook?
Real book.
Real book, yeah, that's
Very
fine.
definitely.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much to Jane for coming on the podcast. I thought that was a really interesting chat, and I thought what she was saying about the first draft, using it almost like a lump of clay that you then form with the rewriting into the finished article is it's not everyone's approach. We've spoken to authors that really take time over that first draft and want a fairly clean first draft, but a lot of people seem to view getting to the end of that first draft as the first big step in forming the novel. I think you're one of those people.
Yeah, I definitely it's hard because the first draft is the worst for me for sure, and you kind of want to get down there. And I think letting yourself know that it's okay to write something that's crap the first draft is good, because if it's easy to get hung up on trying to get that completely perfect first time, and it just takes you get bogged down in it and you get nowhere, and it's not helpful.
I think that's right. I think sometimes, give yourself permission to write badly, as Jane said.
Yeah, it's a nice phrase actually, that. Yeah.
So thanks very much to Jane. The Patient is now out, so we'll put a link in the podcast description so you can pick that up. And we have another great guest next week.
Yeah, next week we're chatting with Ed MacDonald, who is a fantasy writer, and his Raven's Mark trilogy was a real smash hit when that came out. And his latest book is Daughter of Redwinter, which is coming out at the end of this month, and very excited for that.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting chat that we had with Ed. As regular listeners will know, I'm a big fan of fantasy.
Right up Marco Street, this stuff.
Exactly, yeah. It's weird. I went many years not reading any fantasy, but you're back. Just recently, I'm right back into it.
It's 2 back, feet, baby.
Jumped right back in. No, it is the Raven's Mark trilogy. It was great, and I've read Daughter of Redwinter as well, which is different, but also really great as well. So, but it was really good speaking to Ed about writing those things, but also he's someone that's on Twitter that often gives out really good advice to aspiring authors, and we speak to him about that and some of that advice as well. So, if you're an aspiring writer, if you're a fan of fantasy, then please do tune in for next week's episode, because it's a good one. Now, if you enjoyed this week's episode, as ever, please do like and subscribe or follow, and leave us a rating and review on your favourite podcast app, because all of that helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast.
And if you want to get in touch, then you can send us an email to podcast@rightgear.co.uk, or you can send us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is @UKPage1.
But otherwise, have a great week, and we'll see you next episode.
See you later.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here, or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening, and join us for the next episode.
See you later.